But Wall Street, it's quickly moving to acknowledge Joe Biden's win. Here now with more is Bloomberg finance reporter Sonali Basak. Sonali, it's great to see you this morning. What are you learning from your sources about Wall Street's reaction to the election results? I mean, there's this really interesting dichotomy playing out between Washington, D.C. and New York, right? In Washington, D.C., it's not being accepted by the GOP. But Wall Street's like already, hey, it's Vice President-elect Biden.
Yeah, and usually I would give you all
Biden,
this color behind the scenes. But what's remarkable about this week is you're seeing big executives of the banks come out in public and really accept this transition of power. You have the CEO of Bank of America at his own conference yesterday saying that they're ready to work with the new administration. You have James Gorman just this morning speaking at the Conference of Paris, which is an international audience, saying that they expect that we will have a peaceful transition come January, as well as a GOP Senate. So he went a little farther even to kind of predict how Washington will shape up.
Right. It's sort of business leaders. We have leaders around the world all acknowledging that it's President-elect Biden, but the GOP not at this point. Let's fast forward to January 20th, 2021. What do we know about Biden's relationship with Wall Street? What can we learn from what he did during the Obama administration? Right.
So we know that some of the Obama era rules tended to be somewhat tough on Wall Street, especially relative to what we have seen in the Trump era. Remember, at that time, it was a different time. The big banks were known to be much the cause of the last financial crisis. But when you roll forward now, the banks really tried to step ahead and be the cure rather than the cause. They wanted to be there to aid the economy. But if you look at the Biden plans and the Wall Street plans, there is a lot of places where there's either potential overlap or potential tension. We've talked about taxes a lot, but going beyond taxes, Biden really wants to aid community financial institutions, community development institutions. He wants to bring life into communities again. Rules around that for the banking system have been slow to take off. Banks have made their own commitments to communities in terms of how much they would give to promote equality, but they have really pushed back against some of those rules by and large.
I think one thing that's happened as well in the intervening years between 2008 and where we are in 2020 is sort of this rethinking of what capitalism is and who capitalism serves. And if there is sort of a better capitalism. We saw this from the Business Roundtable over the last couple of years, trying to redefine who the stakeholders are, sort of moving away from the Milton Friedman, right? The only social enterprise is for your shareholders.
Yeah.
How do you think that will continue? Do you think we're in for sort of continuing that reckoning?
I'm very glad you asked about this because yesterday I spoke to the president of the New York Stock Exchange, Stacey Cunningham. She has a big stake in the game here because, of course, the stock market. The stock market of household ownership, the richest 1% still own more than half. So how could you say capitalism is working when still so much of the stock market is owned by mostly wealthy individuals and institutions? So her whole thing is we need to make these markets much more accessible to a broader array of people. How does that happen? It can be kind of complicated. They could be changing rules within the SEC. What does that mean in terms of investor disclosures? How far does that really go into expanding stock ownership? And when you go back to the banks and the Biden plan, it's not stock ownership, it's also home ownership. The Biden plan really wants to make sure that playing field is far more level, but can the banks really do it?
Yeah, and I guess the big question, too, is what type of regulatory environment will exist in this divided Congress? What will Biden be able to do, or a Biden administration be able to do, if Republicans indeed hold on to control of the Senate? On that note, there is still hope that the Senate runoffs in Georgia will keep the Senate toward the Republicans, at least on Wall Street, I think it's fair to say. That's the hope there. Does that stifle, though, Biden's plans for pushing through significant reforms?
It makes it harder, but I want to get back to this point of capitalism in Wall Street for a second here because it is very important. All of this is an acknowledgement that these executives want to work with the new administration as quickly as possible. Why? Because we're still in the middle of a pandemic that's getting worse. One of those things beyond taxation, beyond regulation, means in the next couple of months, executives need to make a decision about how they're going to bring people back to the workforce, how they're going to keep people on payrolls at a tough time, and how they will let people really work from home and start to get comfortable with the idea of the vaccine. Even if we have it soon, it might take a while to roll out.
You've had your ear to the ground on Wall Street for a long time now, certainly during the Trump administration. I wonder a lot about the predictability of a Biden administration versus the way that CEOs might have sort of had to, really react quickly to a Trump tweet that could sometimes attack their company, for example.
Right.
I think of General Motors, I think of Boeing, the list goes on.
There's some really notable executives that were known to have a sense of an ear to Donald Trump when as he's been president, right? For example, Steve Schwarzman of Blackstone was one of the notable ones. When you look over at Wall Street now, I think that there has been a general concern that they're not going to have as easy access, or at least kind of friends in the White House as they've had in the past. So a lot of the new potential cabinet members, people are saying that Biden is really considering more academic types, people that will kind of please both sides of the aisle a little more than a Wall Street candidate. And so it's unclear what that relationship will look like, but you do see, seriously, executives stepping out immediately saying we are ready to work with the new administration.
Is there anything right now that you think could sort of, we're going to talk about the rally in a few minutes, a little later in the show, but that's certainly a big part of what we've seen over the last few days with the acceptance of Joe Biden as the president-elect. Is there anything that could derail the optimism that we've seen in the markets over the last few days?
Well, yeah. One of the most telling quotes was at that same conference at Bank of America yesterday from the Goldman CFO, who said that we're past the elections and this is more about the pandemic now. So if data starts to get worse, if we can't really reopen and revitalize the economy in the same way, if we see more bad data from small businesses, if we see more retailers going bankrupt, it starts to stifle a lot of that economic rebound as well as a lot of the great gains in health that we hope to be making soon.
And it has serious ripple effects, right? It's like a domino. When one of those dominoes goes, the rest of them follow as well. Sonali Basak is the finance reporter for Bloomberg News. Sonali, it's always great to see you. Thanks for your time.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.